the animals that defy evolution and never age. What if aging weren't inevitable? What if some creatures simply don't grow old, no matter how long they live? Across the planet, hidden in plain sight and the depths of oceans and underground tunnels, some animals seem to defy the natural rules of evolution. They don't just resist disease or injury, they avoid aging itself. These creatures challenge everything we think we know about life, time, and death. From tiny freshwater polyps that reset their bodies endlessly to massive reptiles that show little sign of slowing down, their secrets have puzzled scientists for decades. Join us as we explore the remarkable world of these ageless animals, uncovering how they live beyond the limits of time and what their stories might mean for the future of biology. The jellyfish that swims backward through time. It drifts silently through the warm, shallow waters of the Mediterranean Sea, unnoticed by most swimmers and divers. It's small, barely the size of a fingernail, its bell-shaped body almost transparent, with a delicate ring of glowing tentacles. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd miss it entirely. But this creature, Turritopsis dohrnii, has a secret that no other known animal has. It can reverse its own aging. Not slow it down, not simply age gracefully, but biologically turn back time and start again. When conditions turn harsh, or when it's injured, starving, or even near death, something strange begins to happen inside its fragile body. Instead of shutting down, the jellyfish's cells reorganize. The adult form, known as a medusa, collapses inward. Its tentacles retract, its body reshapes, and it sinks to the seafloor, where it transforms into a tiny jelly-like blob called a cyst. Then, over several days, the cyst develops into a polyp, a much younger stage in the jellyfish's life cycle. From there, it grows again, like a second birth, and becomes a new adult. It is, in effect, reborn. Scientists didn't even realize what they were looking at when they first collected samples of Turritopsis dohrnii in the 1880s. Back then, it was just one more species in the jellyfish catalog, a curiosity among thousands. It wasn't until the 1990s, in a marine biology lab in Genoa, Italy, that its unique regenerative cycle was noticed. Researchers kept finding what looked like newborn jellyfish in a tank where they had only placed adults. Confused, they watched the process closely and eventually realized they were witnessing something no other species had been observed doing: an organism escaping death by becoming young again. This ability is called transdifferentiation, and it's unlike anything in human biology. In simple terms, it means that cells in the jellyfish's body can completely change their identity. A nerve cell can become a muscle cell. A muscle cell can become part of its digestive system. Instead of degenerating with age, its cells shuffle themselves into a new configuration. To the jellyfish, aging is just another phase-ion that can be undone when necessary. It's easy to see why scientists became obsessed. If this process could be understood and replicated, it could change how we think about aging, not just in jellyfish, but in all animals, including ourselves. But as simple as Turritopsis dohrnii may seem on the outside, its biology remains frustratingly complex. Most of the attempts to trigger the same reversal in other animals have failed. And when researchers try to study the jellyfish outside of its natural habitat, it often refuses to perform the same trick, as if it knows when it's being watched. There are limitations too. These jellyfish aren't invincible. They can still be eaten, crushed, or killed by disease. But under the right conditions, and without predators or fatal injuries, they could repeat this cycle endlessly. That's why they've been called biologically immortal, a phrase that sounds like science fiction, but describes something real, pulsing just beneath the surface of our oceans. What's unsettling isn't just that the jellyfish avoids aging, it's that it has no brain, no centralized consciousness, and no understanding of what it's doing. The reversal isn't a decision, it's a mechanism, written deep into its body. And that raises deeper questions. Why would evolution allow something like this to exist? Why hasn't this ability appeared in other animals? Or has it turned we've just failed to notice? Some marine biologists believe that this process might be more common than we think, hiding in the life cycles of other obscure species. In the darkness of the ocean, there are still thousands of animals we've never properly studied. Others suggest that the jellyfish's immortality may be a fluke, an evolutionary loophole rather than a design. It doesn't make the species more dominant. It doesn't give it special intelligence or strength. It just lets it loop through life again and again, like a record that never finishes playing. For now, Turritopsis dohrnii remains more mystery than model. It slips through the hands of researchers and evades full understanding, leaving behind only questions. But it drifts on, silently rewriting the rules of life with every cycle. Whether it's a clue to something greater or just a strange outlier, one thing is clear. Aging, at least for this jellyfish, is not the end, it's just a pause. The lobster that never grows old. Tucked away under rocky ledges and within narrow crevices, it moves slowly across the ocean floor, each step measured and deliberate. The American lobster doesn't look like a creature that holds any secrets. Its hard shell, its oversized claws, and its beady black eyes give it the appearance of something purely mechanical, built more for survival than mystery. But beneath that armored exterior is a biological puzzle that scientists still haven't solved. As far as we can tell, lobsters don't age in the same way most animals do. Their bodies don't weaken, their organs don't deteriorate, and some continue to grow, reproduce, and heal well past the age when other creatures would have already succumbed to the slow decline of time. Off the coasts of Maine and Nova Scotia, some fishermen have hauled up lobsters so massive they weigh more than 40 pounds. Not just big, but ancient. One, caught near Newfoundland, was estimated to be over 100 years old. And yet there was no sign that its internal systems were failing. No graying of tissues. No breakdown of muscle or nervous function. Its shell was intact, its reflexes sharp, its strength unchanged. For decades, these stories were treated as exaggerations or lucky catches. But recent studies have confirmed what many suspected. Lobsters age differently. Some might not age at all. At the heart of this strange durability is an enzyme with an equally strange name, telomerase. In most animals, including humans, telomerase protects DNA strands during cell division. Every time a cell divides, the tips of the chromosomes called telomeres get slightly shorter. Eventually, they become so short that the cell can no longer divide safely. That's when aging begins to show its effects. Slower healing, weaker tissue, and disease. It stays active throughout their lives, repairing the ends of their DNA over and over again. Their cells keep dividing without the usual consequences. Their bodies don't wear out, at least not in the traditional sense. And yet, there's a catch. Lobsters don't molt just once, they do it again and again, shedding their hard exoskeletons as they grow. When they're young, this happens often. As they get larger, it becomes riskier. The process is physically exhausting and leaves them vulnerable to predators. Eventually, a lobster becomes so big that molting requires more energy than it can afford. It's not age that kills them, it's size. They grow until the process that sustained them becomes impossible. They're trapped by their own success. Something is haunting about that. A creature that defies age, heals itself, and maintains strength for a century, only to die not because its body gave out, but because it became too much to carry. Some researchers believe that, if molting weren't so dangerous, lobsters could live indefinitely. There is no fixed biological endpoint, no ticking clock, just an eventual physical limit they can't surpass. This odd balance between longevity and risk has drawn the attention of geneticists and biologists. Telomerase, once thought to be a simple maintenance tool, is now a major area of study in human medicine. If we could harness it without triggering cancer or cell mutations, it could change how we understand aging itself. But the lobster doesn't offer easy answers. Its biology is complex, and not everything about its resistance to aging can be explained by telomerase alone. There are still unknown factors, proteins, repair mechanisms, or environmental interactions we haven't fully mapped. Not all scientists are convinced, and some warn against labeling lobsters as truly immortal. That word carries too many assumptions, too much weight. After all, these animals still die. They are still eaten, injured, or caught in traps. But it's not death that fascinates researchers, it's the way lobsters delay it, stretch it, and seemingly forget to decline. In labs and tanks around the world, they're being studied not just as seafood, but as time-defying anomalies. Creatures that reject the natural curve of life, and instead climb a straight line until the weight becomes too great. You can hold one in your hands and never know its story. It won't look different from the rest, but inside, its cells may have been dividing cleanly and perfectly for longer than your entire life. Its body, still sharp and strong, carries decades of movement through salt water and stone, and until the moment it can no longer grow, it remains a living question known that science hasn't fully answered. The sharks that remember the Ice Age. In the freezing black water beneath the Arctic ice, a slow-moving shadow glides through silence. It is pale, sluggish, and mostly blind, with a skin roughened by centuries of drifting past jagged rocks and ancient shipwrecks. This is the Greenland sharkcone, of the ocean's longest living vertebrates, and perhaps one of the strangest. Some of these sharks are older than the United States, older than the printing press, maybe even older than Shakespeare's earliest works. And yet, they continue to swim, almost unchanged, in a part of the world where time seems to stretch and fold in on itself. At first, no one could quite tell what they were seeing. For years, the Greenland shark was just another cold water predator, rarely seen and even more rarely studied. It wasn't until a team of researchers in Denmark conducted a radiocarbon analysis on the eye lens proteins of dead sharks in 2016 that the truth began to surface. The results were almost hard to believe. One female, caught accidentally in a fishing net, was estimated to be over 400 years old. That meant she could have been born around the time Galileo first pointed a telescope at the stars. What makes these sharks so remarkable isn't just their age. It's the way they live. Their metabolism is so slow, it's nearly imperceptible. They drift rather than chase, feed on rotting carcasses rather than hunt, and rarely rise from the inky depths. Their bodies operate at a crawl, conserving energy in a way that seems incompatible with survival. But it works. Somehow, it works better than almost any other known strategy in the animal kingdom. Their flesh is toxic to humans, filled with chemicals that cause drunken-like symptoms if eaten. Some researchers think this toxicity is part of why they've survived so long few predators dare to take a bite. But the real mystery lies inside them. Unlike most animals, these sharks show no clear signs of aging. Their bones don't become brittle, their organs don't shrink or shut down. Even into their third or fourth century, they continue to function like younger animals. It's as if they remember how to live through time, not just survive it. Because they live in such deep, cold water and move so slowly, it's nearly impossible to study them in the wild. Most of what we know comes from accidental captures, tagged individuals, and a few remote cameras that catch fleeting moments of movement. What we still don't know could fill volumes. How do their cells resist breakdown for so long? What repairs are happening at the molecular level that prevent the usual damage seen in aging animals? There's no clear answer yet. The Greenland shark doesn't grow quickly. It might take over a century just to reach sexual maturity. Some scientists believe they don't begin to reproduce until they're 150 years old, possibly longer. That would make them the slowest developing animals on Earth. And yet they do reproduce, and their populations, while vulnerable, continue to exist in waters that most creatures avoid altogether. This kind of lifespan changes the way we think about evolution. Most animals live fast and die young, passing on genes quickly in a race against time. However, the Greenland shark takes an entirely different route. It's a creature built for endurance, not urgency. A body meant to persist, not peak. And that persistence has taken it through ice ages, human wars, industrial expansion, and the warming of the oceans. Though that last one may prove to be its greatest threat, there's something eerie about an animal that remembers a world before ours. A shark that may have swum beneath the same sheet of ice that once covered northern Europe, and that still moves today with the same slow purpose it always has. It doesn't chase prey, it doesn't need to. It just waits, watches, survives. When researchers haul them up from the depths, sometimes accidentally, the sharks seem barely aware. Their eyes, often clouded by parasites, stare ahead blankly. They move slowly in the water, as if the world around them is moving too fast to keep up. But inside, something astonishing is happening, something we barely understand. It may be that the key to slowing time, to resisting decay, is not in doing more, but in doing almost nothing at all. Although we've found traces, the full story of the Greenland shark remains out of reach. A living fossil, a silent witness to centuries. It is both present and out of place, like a breath held underwater for far too long, still waiting to be fully exhaled. The worms that live for centuries. Far below the ocean's surface, where the sun never reaches and the water presses in from all sides, strange creatures cling to life beside cracks in the seafloor. There are no coral reefs here, no fish darting between rocks, just towering plumes of black water and fields of venting minerals that hiss like steam from an open wound. And anchored quietly among these vents are the tube wormspale, still and motionless, as if they've been frozen in time. Some of them may have been growing in the same spot for over 200 years, untouched and unchanged, while entire generations of life have passed above them unnoticed. These worms don't look like much at first glance. Their bodies are long and soft, tucked into protective white tubes made of a hard, paper-like material. Bright red plumes stick out of their tops like feathery flowers. They don't have eyes. They don't have mouths or stomachs either. Instead, they rely on bacteria living inside their bodies to convert the chemicals spewing from the vents like hydrogen sulfide into nutrients. It's a process called chemosynthesis, and without it, they wouldn't survive. But in this dark, pressurized world, the arrangement works. And it works for a very long time. The most well-known species among them is Escarpia laminata, found along the Gulf of Mexico near deep-sea seeps. When scientists began tagging and measuring these worms in the early 2000s, they were shocked to discover how little they had changed. Years passed, and the worms barely grew. Their tubes didn't weaken. There were no signs of wear or breakdown. Later studies estimated that some individuals could live for 250 years, possibly longer. In biological terms, they were almost motionless, not just in space, but in time. Along with an extended lifespan comes an exceptionally slow growth rate. A worm might only add a few millimeters of length over a year. But in the deep sea, where resources are limited and predators are rare, that slowness is not a disadvantage. It's a strategy. There's no rush to mature, no race to reproduce before being eaten. The environment rewards patience, and the worms respond with quiet endurance. Their bodies don't follow the same timeline that governs surface animals. The bacteria inside them remain stable. The tissues don't seem to accumulate the usual cellular damage that leads to aging. It's not that they're invincible, but they appear to have found a way to stretch life without breaking it. And that stretches what we understand about aging in animals. Trying to calculate how long they live proved more difficult than expected. Very few animals have lifespans that can't be measured with traditional aging markers. But with Escarpia laminata, even the oldest individuals showed no clear signs of decline, no drop in function, no halt in reproduction. They didn't peak and fall, they plateaued and stayed there. That kind of longevity raises questions. What mechanisms are they using to avoid aging? Are their cells repairing damage more efficiently? Are they simply avoiding stressors that other animals can't escape? There's no clear answer. Because these worms live in one of the most hostile and hard-to-reach places on the planet. Sending down equipment to observe them is expensive, and gathering data takes years. But what little we've learned so far is enough to challenge how we think evolution handles aging. These aren't creatures that evolved to be fast or fierce. They're survivors of stillness built not to win, but to last. What's more unsettling is how easily they go unnoticed. They don't move much. They don't glow or signal or call out. And yet they're there, whole colonies of worms that began growing before the Civil War, still breathing through the vents, still feeding from the planet's internal chemistry. Their world is one of pressure and silence. And in that silence, time barely matters. Even under close study, its age remains well disguised. Nothing about its appearance would tell you if it was born a decade ago or 2 centuries earlier. But inside its tube, something extraordinary is happening. It continues, without decay, without rush, without end. It's not dramatic, it's not fast. But in a world that punishes speed with short life, the worm that waits ends up outliving nearly everything. The reptile that refuses to evolve. On a few remote islands off the coast of New Zealand, there lives a creature that looks like a lizard but isn't one. It moves slowly, hides under rocks or in burrows, and only comes out at night. Its scaly body is greenish-gray, and its face carries the blank, ancient stare of something that doesn't quite belong in the modern world. This is the tuatara reptile, so strange that when scientists first studied it in the 19th century, they didn't know how to classify it. It seemed familiar, but nothing matched. That confusion hasn't gone away. The more we've learned about the tuatara, the more it seems like a survivor from another Timea creature that has remained mostly unchanged for over 200 million years. The tuatara belongs to an order called Rhynchocephalia, which once had many species spread across the globe. Now, only one remains. The rest disappeared, possibly during the mass extinction events that wiped out the dinosaurs. But the tuatara stayed. It didn't shift into something new. It didn't adapt into a faster or more specialized form. It simply endured, holding on to the same traits that had once allowed its ancestors to thrive when the continents looked nothing like they do now. Its evolutionary standstill is remarkable, but it's not the whole story. It's also the strange collection of traits it still carries, like clues left behind by a different world. Its skull is built differently from modern reptiles. It has a primitive jaw joint, a unique set of teeth fused directly to its bones, and a kind of third eye, a photosensitive spot on the top of its head, covered by a thin layer of skin. This parietal eye isn't used for vision in the way we understand it, but it may help the animal sense changes in light or navigate seasonal cycles. No modern lizard has anything quite like it. And the deeper you look inside the tuatara, the weirder it gets. It has one of the slowest metabolisms of any reptile. its heartbeat can drop to just a few beats per minute. In colder temperatures, it becomes almost motionless, entering a near hibernation state without needing to shut down entirely. It can live over 100 years, and it takes more than a decade just to reach full maturity. Even its reproductive cycle defies modern patterns. Mating happens infrequently, and eggs take over a year to hatch. Thanks to its slow metabolism, the tuatara hasn't needed to evolve quickly over time. In fact, it seems evolution barely touches it at all. Genetic studies have shown that while its molecular clock, the rate at which DNA changes over time, ticks along faster than expected, the outward result is the opposite. The tuatara holds its form, repeating it across generations with almost no visible change. It's like evolution is happening, but the animal refuses to respond. This stubbornness has turned the tuatara into a biological paradox. It evolves fast at the DNA level, yet slowly or not at all in how it looks and lives. Scientists aren't sure why. Maybe it's because the tuatara's environment hasn't forced major changes. Maybe its slow metabolism protects it from the kinds of pressures that shape other species. Or maybe it already reached an ideal form for its niche, and there was no need to keep adapting. Even now, the tuatara lives only in very specific places. It disappeared from most of New Zealand after the arrival of humans and invasive predators. But on protected offshore islands, it continues as mostly undisturbed, mostly the same. Conservation efforts have helped its population recover in recent years, but it remains vulnerable. Not because it's weak, but because it's rare. And rarity in the modern world is dangerous. Looking at a tuatara is like looking backward through time. It doesn't roar or glow or display bright colors. It doesn't need to. It simply is, just as it has been for hundreds of millions of years. It carries the quiet weight of ancient survival, not by conquering its environment, but by staying still while the world changed around it. Where others evolved or went extinct, it waited. And so it continues, walking slowly over stones and underbrush, blinking those cold, steady eyes, not as a leftover, but as a witness, not broken or incomplete, but perfectly preserved, a living trace of a world long gone, and a reminder that change isn't always the rule. Sometimes survival means not moving forward at all. The salamander that stays a child forever. In the still, murky waters of lakes and canals in central Mexico, a strange creature hovers just beneath the surface. It has a wide, flat head and tiny, dark eyes set close together like beads pressed into soft clay. Feathery gills fan out from both sides of its neck, swaying gently as it breathes. To someone unfamiliar, it might look like a young salamander still in its larval stage. And that's exactly what it is, except it never grows out of it. This is the axolotl, a creature that lives its entire life in a body that, for most amphibians, would be temporary. It stays forever suspended in youth, never undergoing the final metamorphosis into adulthood. It remains, by choice or by design, a child that never leaves the water. Most amphibians begin their lives in water with gills, then transform. Legs grow stronger, lungs develop, gills disappear, and eventually they leave the water behind, adapting to life on land. The axolotl doesn't follow this pattern. It keeps its gills, keeps its aquatic lifestyle, and keeps the juvenile form of its body permanently. This rare condition is known as neoteny, and it's not just a delay in development. It's a full biological decision to stop growing up. As if its appearance weren't strange enough, it can reproduce without ever maturing. It doesn't need to transform to continue its species. And yet, under extreme conditions, when injected with certain hormones or forced into different environments, it can be made to metamorphose. Its gills shrivel, its lungs take over, and it drags itself onto land as a changed, adult-like creature. But the process is unnatural and often dangerous. many don't survive it. They're not built for life beyond the water, even if their genetics technically allow it. Outside of captivity, axolotls are now mostly confined to Lake Xochimilco, on the edge of Mexico City. The lake itself has shrunk drastically due to urban development, pollution, and invasive species. What used to be a vast, complex ecosystem has been reduced to a network of canals. The axolotl now survives more in laboratories than it does in the wild. And yet, despite its shrinking habitat, it remains one of the most studied animals in modern biology. But it's not its lifestyle that makes it remarkable, it's the biology behind it. The axolotl has a gift that defies logic. It can regenerate almost anything. Lost limbs grow back perfectly: bones, muscles, nerves, even skin. But it goes deeper than that. Parts of its heart, spinal cord, and even sections of its brain can heal in ways no other vertebrate is capable of. And when it regenerates, there's no scarring, no trace of the wound at all. It's as if the injury never happened. Figuring out the mechanism behind it has been a slow, ongoing effort. The axolotl's immune system plays a role, but so does its DNA sections of its genome that seem to guide cell growth and patterning with incredible precision. Some have even tried applying what they've learned to human medicine. There's hope that if we understand the mechanisms well enough, we might one day trigger similar regeneration in ourselves. But the axolotl keeps most of its secrets hidden. The same neoteny that keeps it in a youthful body may also be linked to its healing powers, but no one has been able to fully connect the dots. Behind its unusual biology lies a tale tinged with loss. Its body holds clues that could change how we treat injuries, disease, and even aging itself. But the creature that carries those clues is slowly vanishing. In the wild, it's nearly extinct. Even in captivity, where they thrive in aquariums, they depend on human intervention to survive. They're symbols of what nature can do when left to its own path, but they also remind us how easily those paths can be lost. Watching an axolotl move is like watching time hesitate. It floats rather than swims, its frills swaying like leaves in a current. It doesn't seem rushed or burdened by the rules that govern other animals. It has the tools to grow older, to transform, but it doesn't. And maybe that's what makes it unsettling. In a world where everything changes, the axolotl doesn't. It holds on to youth like a memory that refuses to fade, alive in a form the rest of us had to leave behind. The tortoise that watches civilizations fade. On the remote island of St. Helena, a tortoise ambles through its enclosure, unbothered by speed, its movements shaped by centuries, not seconds. Its eyes are cloudy but alert, its breathing steady, its body unhurried by the passing years. This is Jonathan, a Seychelles giant tortoise, and by all current estimates, he was born sometime around 1832. That would make him nearly 200 years old, a living witness to the invention of the telephone, the rise and fall of empires, and the turn of 2 centuries. But Jonathan isn't unique. Giant tortoises around the world are quietly defying what we expect from aging. They don't grow weak with time. They don't show the usual signs of decline. Some scientists believe they may not even age at all in the traditional sense. Across the Galapagos Islands and other isolated parts of the world, these creatures move with the same ancient rhythm. Their shells are massive, their skin thick and wrinkled like dried leather, and their movements deliberate, as if every step has been taken before. Unlike other animals that slow down with age, tortoises seem to maintain a surprising level of function deep into their 2nd century. Their hearts keep beating at the same pace. Their organs don't seem to break down. Even their ability to reproduce continues long after most animals would have stopped. As scientists studied these long-lived reptiles, what they found challenged the entire concept of senescence, the slow breakdown of the body over time. In many species, there's a predictable arc, a peak of health and youth, followed by a steady decline. But tortoises don't follow that arc. In fact, a study published in 2022 found that certain species, including the Galapagos and Aldabra tortoises, show negligible senescence. Their probability of dying does not increase with age. A tortoise at 150 has the same odds of surviving the year as one at 50. It's as if time passes, but doesn't take anything from them. Their secret may lie in how they're built. With a slow metabolism, a thick shell for protection, and a lifestyle free from natural predators, tortoises live cautiously by nature. They don't waste energy. They don't rush. Every part of their biology seems designed for endurance, and because they avoid high-risk behavior, their bodies are rarely pushed to breaking points. In the absence of danger, their biology simply keeps going. Some of the most famous examples live long enough to outlast the people who first cared for them. Harriet, a Galapagos tortoise once collected by Charles Darwin himself, lived to the age of 176 in an Australian zoo. Adwaita, an Aldabra tortoise believed to have belonged to British colonial officers in India, may have lived to 255, though exact records are scarce. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a broader pattern that repeats across continents and centuries. Still, long life doesn't mean invincibility. Tortoises can die from infection, injury, or starvation. Their long lifespan makes them vulnerable to environmental changes, habitat loss, and human interference. While they resist internal aging, the outside world still reaches them. But even so, they persist longer than nearly any other land animal, surviving through eras that most life forms never see the end of. There's something deeply grounding about watching a tortoise move its gaze steady, its limbs pushing forward with quiet strength. It doesn't chase, it doesn't flee, it just continues. In a world that often feels like it's racing forward, the tortoise is a reminder that not everything is in a hurry. And maybe, in that slowness, there's something timeless. Jonathan, still alive today, has outlived the monarchs whose reigns he's seen come and go. He was born before the light bulb, before the Eiffel Tower, before the first photograph of a person. And yet, each morning, he rises with the sun, eats his leaves, and walks the same paths he always has, unchanged by the noise of the world outside his garden. To live long is one thing. To live without growing old in the way we understand it is something else entirely. The tortoise doesn't just endure, it lingers, steady and intact, while everything else fades around it. Civilizations rise, burn, and fall, but the tortoise keeps walking. The microbe that returns from the dead. Beneath the layers of ancient ice and deep within pockets of permafrost, something waits. It isn't moving, it isn't feeding, it doesn't appear alive by any normal measure, but it isn't dead either. Locked in suspended silence, it remains intact, unchanged for thousands, sometimes even millions of years. And when the ice melts or conditions shift just slightly, it wakes. It begins to stir, to replicate, to live again. These are the microbes that return from the dead, organisms so small you'd never see them, yet so resilient they seem to ignore the limits of time itself. A scientific expedition in 2000 drilled into the ancient ice of Siberia, pulling out a deep core sample. Hidden inside were microbes that, after being frozen for tens of thousands of years, suddenly became active again. They began dividing, metabolizing, behaving as if no time had passed at all. Other groups followed. In Antarctica, researchers uncovered bacteria sealed in ice for millions of years. Once thawed, they too revived slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. It was as if a switch had been flipped, waking something that had merely been paused. Surviving the freeze is only the beginning of what makes them unnerving. Some endure radiation levels that would destroy human DNA in seconds. Others resist desiccation, high pressure, and even chemical exposure. They don't need ideal conditions. They only need not be completely destroyed. As long as the internal structure remains even partially intact, many can find a way back. One of the most well-known examples is Bacillus permians, a bacterium reportedly revived from a 250-million-year-old salt crystal, though later debates question the accuracy of the dating. Still, the principle remains. Certain bacteria, particularly those that form spores, can enter a dormant state so complete that they can go without metabolism for unimaginably long periods. Then, under the right conditions, they start over as if death had never occurred. Unlike animals that slow down or sleep through difficult periods, these microbes don't just wait, they shut down entirely. No heartbeat, no breathing, no activity at all. Their DNA folds tightly, their membranes harden. They become something like stone. But that appearance is misleading, because within that stillness is the potential to begin again. In some cases, they don't even need to be preserved by nature. In 2007, bacteria collected from inside an old spacecraft assembly room environment that had been regularly sterilized were found to have survived for decades in an artificial vacuum. Other experiments placed microbes in low Earth orbit, exposing them to direct cosmic radiation. Some survive that too. Time spares them, but not completely. Many fail to revive, some mutate, others become unstable or incomplete, but the ones that do return challenge everything we thought we knew about life's limits. If something can pause its biological clock for tens of thousands of years, where does life end and death begin? And if it can do that on Earth, could it also do it somewhere else? That possibility is what draws astrobiologists to these ancient survivors. If life can withstand deep freeze, radiation, vacuum, and time, then it may be able to travel across space inside rock, dust, or ice. Some have proposed that early life on Earth may have arrived this way, hitching a ride from Mars or beyond, waking only when it found the right environment. It's not a theory without controversy, but these microbes give it more weight than it once had. They endure, yes, but they do so in a way that feels almost unnatural. They don't call attention to themselves. They leave no trace of their long sleep. They wait in shadows and cracks, in the buried layers of Earth that rarely see light, holding on until conditions shift just slightly in their favor. Then they return, not with noise or growth, but with a slow, steady unfolding cell by cell, replication by replication. Some of them are still buried beneath layers of permafrost that haven't thawed in over 100,000 years, but with warming temperatures and rapid melting, they're beginning to reappear one by one. We don't know all of their names. We don't know what some of them are capable of, but they're not fossils. They're not extinct. They are, even now, beginning to move again, living proof that death, in some forms, is just a very long pause. The fish that shouldn't exist anymore. Fishermen off the coast of South Africa weren't expecting anything unusual that day in 1938. They were hauling up their nets, sorting the catch, tossing fish into buckets, when something odd turned up among the usual pile of fins and scales. It was large, blue-gray, and covered in thick, prehistoric-looking scales. Its fins weren't shaped like a normal fish's. They looked more like limbs, jointed and fleshy. No one could identify it, but the local museum curator, Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer, knew right away that it was something special. She sent drawings to ichthyologist J.L.B. Smith, and when he saw them, he was stunned. It wasn't just rare, it was supposed to be extinct. The fish was a coelacanth, a species believed to have vanished 65 million years ago, around the same time as the dinosaurs. Its fossil record stopped abruptly at the end of the Cretaceous period. Scientists had long considered it a textbook example of extinction, but here it was alive, fresh, and very real, hauled from the deep waters off the Comoros Islands. It wasn't a fossil. It was swimming in modern seas, unchanged for millions of years. Features of the coelacanth set it apart from anything that's evolved in recent times. Its lobed fins move like limbs, rotating in a pattern that looks more like the gait of a walking animal than something meant for water. Its skeleton, muscles, and internal organs follow a structure found in creatures that once crawled the seafloor before vertebrates ever stepped onto land. It even has a tiny vestigial lunguscus now, but a leftover from ancestors that once breathed air. In many ways, it's less a modern fish and more a living echo from a forgotten age. For a long time, only one species was known, and only from a few rare captures. Then, in 1997, another was found off the coast of Sulawesi, Indonesia. Genetic analysis showed it was different enough to be its own species. That discovery proved that not only had the coelacanth survived, but two distinct populations had managed to persist in deep waters for millions of years, undetected by science. The coelacanth lives far from shore, in depths of up to 800 meters, hiding in lava caves and cold currents that most fishing gear doesn't reach. That isolation may have been its shield, allowing it to survive unnoticed and unchanged while the surface world transformed. While mammals rose and empires fell, the coelacanth simply stayed where it was, moving slowly through the dark, using the same body plan its ancestors had perfected long ago. Rather than releasing eggs into the water, coelacanths carry their young until birth. Their development takes place entirely within the mother's body, a rare trait in fish. They also have a low metabolic rate, and they grow incredibly slowly. Some individuals don't reach sexual maturity until they're around 50 years old, and once mature, they reproduce only once every few years. It's not a system built for fast adaptation, but in the deep, stable environment they inhabit, it doesn't need to be. Their evolution is so slow that coelacanths have been called living fossils, though that phrase can be misleading. They're not frozen in time. They've changed, just very, very gradually. Still, their ancient design remains distinct enough to set them apart from every other living fish on Earth. Their DNA carries instructions from a world long buried, a time when vertebrates were still figuring out how to become something more. To look at a coelacanth is to feel a kind of dissonance. It shouldn't be here. Its features don't fit the modern blueprint. But it exists anyway, pushing through water with its strange fins, its body dense and heavy, its eyes reflecting the flickers of deep-sea light. It doesn't belong to today's world, but it's never really left. There are only a few dozen caught on record. Most sightings now come from deep submersibles and rare underwater footage. Scientists continue to study them, hoping to unlock the evolutionary secrets they carry, though their remote habitat and slow reproduction make research difficult. But even without all the answers, their very existence poses a question we still can't fully answer. How can something survive untouched, unseen, and unchanged for so long? More than a survivor, it's a challenge to the stories we've told about extinction and time. It shouldn't exist, and yet, in the cold depths of the ocean, it does. The hydra that regrows forever. In shallow ponds and still backwaters, where the surface barely stirs and soft light filters through reeds, a tiny creature floats freely, carried only by the current. At a glance, it's unremarkable, a thread-like body with waving tentacles, no eyes, no skeleton, and no real brain. But the hydra, named after the mythic beast that grew back its heads, carries something far more astonishing than legend. It doesn't just survive injury, it appears to live outside the rules of time itself. constantly renewing, returning, as if aging were a concept it had never heard of. The hydra is a freshwater polyp, just a few millimeters long and almost invisible unless magnified. Under the microscope, its body reveals a kind of elegant simplicity: two thin layers of cells, a basic nerve net, and a single opening that functions as both mouth and exit. Despite this simplicity, it performs the usual tasks of life. It feeds, it responds to stimuli, and it reproduces. But what truly sets it apart is its refusal to decay. Slice it into fragments, and each one will regenerate into a new hydra. Crush it, and from those remnants, a new body will form. Damage is not healed, it is erased. In lab settings, hydras began to show scientists something they weren't prepared for. Week after week passed, then months, even years, and still, there were no signs of aging, no drop in fertility, no change in activity, no cellular wear. In species after species, biologists observed that the hydra showed no increase in mortality over time. It wasn't slowing down, it wasn't dying. It was simply continuing, cell by cell, as though aging had never begun. Much of this may come down to its stem cells. In most animals, these regenerative cells degrade over time, eventually losing the ability to replace damaged tissues. But in the hydra, stem cells remain permanently active. They divide endlessly, producing new cells at a steady pace. This isn't repair in the reactive sense, it's more like a quiet, ongoing reset. Old cells are swapped out before they can fail. There's no backlog of damage, no accumulation of time. As a result, the organism never hits the tipping points that trigger decline in more complex creatures. This rhythm of self-renewal is visible in the way it reproduces. Though it's capable of sexual reproduction, the hydra more often buds, producing miniature copies of itself that grow on its body, then drift away when they're ready. Unlike animals that invest massive energy into creating new life, the hydra reproduces without effort. There's no exhaustion, no damage. The parent doesn't shrink or age, it simply continues, as though nothing happened at all. Daniel Martinez's 1998 study questioned a core assumption in biology, that aging happens to every organism. He had spent years tracking Hydra vulgaris in stable lab conditions, watching for any decline in function. What he found was shocking: no senescence, no measurable aging, no gradual decline in reproduction or cellular efficiency. The hydra, it seemed, didn't age and perhaps never had. His paper quietly challenged centuries of biological assumptions, offering proof that aging might not be as inevitable as once thought. Whatever the secret is, it's still keeping itself well hidden. The hydra's genome reveals genes responsible for cell division, DNA repair, and programmed cell death, working in harmony to maintain balance. Yet, transferring this into human biology isn't simple. The hydra's gift may come from its simplicity. It lacks the complications of organs, blood, and bones. There are no joints to stiffen, no lungs to collapse. It doesn't face the problems that large, complex organisms must solve every day. And that may be why its path remains closed to us, for now. Something about it keeps pulling us back. In research labs around the world, hydras float silently in dishes of filtered water, observed under microscopes by scientists, hoping to unlock the code behind their ageless existence. They're not colorful or graceful. They don't attract much attention, but in their stillness, they hold a kind of quiet defiance, proof that time doesn't rule everything. They don't rage against death. They don't even seem to notice it. Most people will never see one, never realize what it is or what it represents. But in its tiny, transparent body, the hydra offers something profound. It doesn't grow old. It doesn't break down. It simply begins again, over and over, while the rest of us keep counting forward. The crocodile's mysterious immunity. Quiet rivers conceal more than mud hidden beneath is one of the oldest jawlines in nature. These creatures haven't changed much since the age of dinosaurs. Their bodies are covered in thick, armored scales. Their eyes remain still, even as they drift through water like floating logs. But there's something far stranger about crocodiles than their ancient design or bone-crushing bite, something hidden beneath the skin. Despite living in filthy, bacteria-ridden environments, suffering deep wounds in violent fights, and hunting prey with teeth that often tear flesh apart, crocodiles don't seem to get infections. They heal, and they heal fast. When a crocodile is injured, even badly, it doesn't behave like other animals. There's no visible swelling, no rot, no sign of fever or decay. The wound closes, tissue regrows, and it continues on, often without slowing down. In swamps and rivers that are teeming with pathogens, this alone is remarkable. But what stunned scientists even more was what they found in its blood. Tests showed that crocodile blood contained powerful antimicrobial peptide molecules capable of destroying bacteria, viruses, even fungi far more effectively than those found in humans. This discovery wasn't just theoretical. In 2008, researchers in Australia conducted a series of experiments with blood taken from saltwater crocodiles. They exposed it to some of the world's deadliest bacteria, including strains resistant to modern antibiotics. In most cases, the microbes didn't stand a chance. The crocodile blood broke down their membranes, killing them on contact. What these animals carry in their immune systems is more than just defensates and internal arsenal, shaped over millions of years of survival in some of Earth's most hostile ecosystems. Adding to the mystery is the fact that crocodiles show few signs of aging. Unlike most animals that show gradual decline, slower reactions, weaker muscles, reduced fertility, crocodiles don't follow that pattern. A 50-year-old crocodile is often just as capable as a 20-year-old one. Their skin may get tougher, their movements slower with size, but their cells don't seem to degrade in the same way. They show signs of negligible senescence, meaning they don't deteriorate simply because time is passing. For a creature this large, this dangerous, and this ancient, that's nearly unheard of. They've been on this planet for over 200 million years, surviving mass extinctions, climate shifts, and the collapse of ecosystems that wiped out entire species. And yet, here they are, still lurking in rivers, still hunting with quiet patience, still immune to the kinds of slow decline that affect nearly every other creature. Their biology has barely changed, because it hasn't needed to. What they have works. That resilience doesn't come without mystery. Researchers are still working to understand how their immune systems operate so efficiently. How do they fight off pathogens that kill other animals in hours? How do their wounds close without infection, even in stagnant water? And what is it in their blood that could potentially help us if we could isolate and replicate it? Their unique immune traits have sparked interest in potential medical applications. The peptides found in crocodile blood could one day form the basis of new antibiotics, especially as resistance continues to grow. Some scientists even believe that these immune proteins might help fight cancer cells, given their ability to identify and destroy dangerous invaders without harming surrounding tissue. But there's still a long way to go. The complexity of their immune system, combined with the challenge of producing their peptides synthetically, has kept most of this research in early stages. In the meantime, the crocodile remains what it has always been: a silent force in the water, a survivor without apology. Its strength is not just in its muscles or jaws, but in its chemistry. It carries within it a form of resistance that modern science is only beginning to understand. Something primal, something that reminds us of a world most animals have forgotten. Wounds that would cripple others simply vanish. Exposure to toxins and bacteria leaves no mark, and as the years go by, it barely slows down. It doesn't just endure, it persists with a kind of brutal elegance, as if time itself hasn't figured out how to break through its defenses. The crocodile doesn't evolve quickly, doesn't change much, and doesn't need to. What it has inside may be the reason it never had to. The naked mole rat's secret. Hidden far underground, where air grows thin and light never touches, something unnatural has learned to thrive. With its wrinkled pink skin, long protruding teeth, and nearly hairless body, the naked mole rat doesn't look like much. It's often mistaken for something sickly or malformed, a life form shaped more by accident than by design. But appearances can deceive. Hidden within this small, homely mammal is a series of biological traits that seem to break the rules entirely. It doesn't age like other mammals. It doesn't get cancer. And it shrugs off pain, oxygen loss, and even acid. The naked mole rat lives underground in colonies that function more like insect hives than mammal families. One queen breeds, and the rest are sterile workers. They dig constantly with their teeth, moving through the hard-packed soil in total darkness. They rarely surface. In their world, oxygen is low, carbon dioxide is high, and temperatures barely change. It's not a place most mammals could survive for long, but the mole rat thrives. For such a small, subterranean creature, it lives far longer than anyone would expect. Most rodents of its size last just a few years, burning out quickly with high metabolisms and short lifespans. But mole rats often live past 30. Not only do they survive much longer than expected, but they also show almost none of the usual signs of aging. Their bones don't weaken. Their reproductive systems don't decline. They keep breeding and digging with the same efficiency well into what should be old age. It's as if the clock starts ticking but never moves forward. Beyond their longevity, it's their resistance to cancer that truly defies explanation. In experiments, scientists have injected naked mole rats with substances that cause tumors in almost every other mammal. But the mole rats remain healthy. Their bodies seem to reject cancer before it starts. One reason may lie in a molecule called high molecular mass hyaluronana substance found in their tissues that helps keep their cells from crowding too tightly, which is often a trigger for cancer growth. Pain is another signal the mole rat doesn't follow. It can be exposed to acids, chili oil, or other irritants that would cause discomfort in nearly any other animal, and it barely reacts. Its nerves are built differently, lacking certain receptors that most mammals use to sense pain. In the low oxygen, high acid world underground, this may be an evolutionary adaptation to avoid suffering in an environment that constantly challenges the body. Perhaps the most unbelievable trait of all is how they survive without oxygen. In lab tests, naked mole rats have been placed in completely oxygen-free environments for up to 18 minutes and survived. Rather than suffocating, they switch to a metabolic process more similar to plants than animals, converting stored sugars in a way that doesn't require oxygen at all. When oxygen returns, they continue as if nothing happened. No brain damage, no lingering effects. For decades, the naked mole rat was mostly ignored, written off as a biological oddity. But now, researchers around the world are studying its genes, its proteins, and its cells, searching for answers hidden in this blind, burrowing creature. It may not look like a miracle, but inside, it behaves like one. Could humans one day learn how to resist aging, ignore pain, or even outlast oxygen loss, just as the mole rat does effortlessly in the dark? Science has poked, prodded, and published, but the mole rat still won't give everything away. It doesn't flash its abilities. It doesn't fight or flee. It continues tunneling through the soil, unaware of the attention it now draws from above. But every discovery brings us closer to understanding the quiet genius of its biology. The way it bends the rules doesn't feel like luck, it feels like a blueprint that nature buried underground, waiting to be uncovered. Below ground, it continues, quiet, deliberate, and nearly ageless. The naked mole rat isn't invincible, but it's something just as strange. It's a creature that moves through life as if the dangers most of us fear, aging, pain, diseases simply don't apply. And maybe, for it, they never have. The sponge that barely ages. Down where pressure reigns and silence never lifts, a creature grows not fast, but endlessly. It has no eyes, no mouth, and no muscles. It doesn't move, doesn't hunt, and doesn't even appear alive at first glance. But sponges, some of the oldest animals on Earth, have been clinging to rocks and coral for hundreds of millions of years, and many of them show almost no signs of aging, even after thousands of years of life. A sponge doesn't live fast, and it doesn't live loud. It filters the ocean around it, drawing in water and pulling out microscopic food. That's all it needs. Its structure is simple, just a loose network of cells, supported by a skeleton made of silica or spongin. But behind that simplicity is a strange kind of resilience. Many sponge species grow so slowly that a few centimeters can take decades, and yet their cells remain just as efficient, just as functional as when they first attached to the seafloor. Certain sponges live out their entire lives in just a few years. Others, like the glass sponge Monorhaphis chuni, have been estimated to live for over 11,000 years. In the cold, deep waters near the ocean floor, one individual was found growing in the same spot it had occupied for over 100 centuries. Its body had formed a glassy spike nearly 10 feet long. It had survived changes in sea level, temperature shifts, and passing geological time, without breaking down, without fading away. Sponges aren't immortal, but they come remarkably close to what scientists call negligible senescence. This means that their chances of dying don't increase with age. A sponge that's 10,000 years old is no more likely to die tomorrow than one that's 10. They don't appear to weaken, they don't stop reproducing. They don't slow down because they never sped up in the first place. What sets sponges apart is their capacity to break down and rebuild from the ground up. Push a sponge through a fine mesh so that it breaks apart into individual cells, and given the right conditions, those cells will find each other again. They'll reassemble, rebuild, and return to functioning as a whole organism. It's regeneration at a level that seems more like science fiction than biology. There's no central control system, just cooperation between cells that never seem to lose their sense of identity, even when separated. This regeneration is one of the reasons sponges can survive for so long. Damage isn't something they fear, it's something they recover from, slowly and steadily. And because their lives don't demand energy spikes or high metabolism, there's little cellular waste, little strain. Their way of existing is so passive that it barely causes internal wear. Time simply doesn't have many ways to get in. They also hold clues in their genomes. Sponges produce compounds that act as natural antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and even anti-cancer agents. Some of these molecules are so effective that pharmaceutical companies now look to sponges as potential sources for new medicines. In their quiet, static lives, they've evolved tools to ward off infection and cellular damage without ever needing to flee or fight. Their pace is part of the reason they've been largely overlooked. A creature that does nothing quickly rarely makes headlines. But scientists have started to realize that slow doesn't mean simple, and that survival over geologic timescales isn't an accident. These animals have withstood volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and ice ages. They've outlived empires, continents, and even species that once ruled the sea. And all the while, they've stayed mostly unchanged, clinging to stone and filtering the sea, year after quiet year. Long before humans learned to farm or build, some of these deep-sea sponges had already begun their slow lives. They've seen the planet shift around them, yet they remain rooted in place, aging so slowly it's barely measurable. They don't rush, they don't break down, they don't fade the way most living things do. While everything above rushes forward, the sponge drifts through ages without urgency, as if time has no claim on it. It doesn't resist decay with effort. It simply avoids it by never pushing itself toward collapse. And maybe that's its secret. To live long, perhaps the key isn't to fight time, but to ignore it altogether.